My wife helped her tyrant sister betray, and she hid the fact that she was being manipulated, so I canceled the wedding with her. I need to talk about something. I feel like I'm losing my mind. My fiancée Emily and I were engaged and had known each other for nearly 8 years. We were only a few weeks away from our wedding, and I had just seen something that made me feel like I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Emily and I were taking advantage of a rare evening at home to relax. While I was out in the garage working on a project, Emily was inside preparing dinner. As happens when you're working hard, I got thirsty and went back inside to grab a drink. That's when I found Emily in the kitchen, cooking and talking on speakerphone. It took me a moment to recognize the voice on the other end. It was Scott, my brother-in-law. This is where everything starts to go off the rails. Scott had been trying to get in touch with his wife, Julie, and she wasn't responding to his messages, so he asked Emily where Julie was. Emily told him, "She just left here, she should be home in about an hour or so." I should mention that Julie is Scott's wife of 7 years. I have to admit, it didn't register immediately what she had said. First of all, Emily said that Julie had been here. But Julie hadn't been. Over last time we saw her was 2 days ago, when she came by to help Emily with some last-minute wedding preparations. Then it hit. Scott had mentioned that Julie wasn't answering her texts, so why was she messaging Julie expecting a reply? And why would she say Julie should be home in an hour unless she knew exactly where she was or was texting her right in front of me to tell her to get home quickly? The only conclusion I could draw was that Emily was lying to Scott about Julie's whereabouts. She was likely warning Julie that Scott was expecting her home soon. For the next 6 hours, I couldn't stop thinking of various scenarios. Some were innocent, but most were terrible. I really wanted to confront Emily, but I knew I wouldn't get a straight answer if what I suspected was true, which leads me to about 3 in the morning. Around midnight, I woke up to use the bathroom and felt a strong urge to check Emily's phone. We both know each other's pins, so it wasn't hard to access. I took the phone to the guest room, unlocked it, and sure enough, my worst fears were confirmed. For the past 8 months, Julie had been having an affair with a coworker, and Emily had been helping her cover it up the entire time. Their messages were filled with details about the affair, graphic descriptions, and incredibly demeaning comments about Scott. Seeing all of this made me physically sick. Here was my soon-to-be wife enabling her sister to cheat without any apparent remorse. I took screenshots of the entire conversation, put the phone back where I found it, and then retreated to my office to try to process everything. I was in shock. I couldn't marry Emily, not after seeing this. There was no justification for her helping her sister cheat and hurt Scott, not to mention their 5-year-old daughter. But we were only weeks away from the wedding, and our families had invested so much money into it. None of that money was coming back. And on top of everything, I felt like an idiot. How could I not have seen this side of her? What the hell am I supposed to do? I'm not fit to marry her. I'm not at all ready. But the truth is, I still want to. I thought we had a bright future together. She's beautiful and kind, and she's never wronged me before. But now I can't look at her the same way. It's like a dark stain on an otherwise perfect painting. I just don't know how I got it so wrong, and I'm genuinely dreading what I know I need to do. I feel like breaking something or throwing up. Guys, you don't need to convince me not to marry Emily. That much is clear. The wedding is off. Now, I'm just trying to figure out how to move forward and muster the courage to take action. The expectations of everyone are weighing heavily on me, but I refuse to buckle under the pressure. I just find it unbearable to deal with the aftermath, and I'm really angry that I find myself in this situation. It's 6 in the morning. I'm running on just a few hours of sleep and worked 2 hours already. To avoid Emily and stew on this, I'm going to take a shower and get to work early. Thanks to the supportive folks here, and a big raspberry to those telling me to find out Emily's reasons for this mess. Around 8 in the morning, I got to work. Since no one was in the office yet, I decided to start pulling off the Band-Aid and called my brother. He lives in another country, so he was still up after putting his kids to bed. Telling him about this was hard, because I know he's invested a lot of money in airfare to bring his family here. But to his credit, as an older brother, he just supported me and didn't bring it up once. He also made a really good point. He said, "You deal with liars and cheaters daily at work." He was absolutely right when he said, "I don't blame you for wanting to have somewhere to go where this isn't a concern." I now understand why I'm reacting so strongly to Emily's involvement in this deceit. He also had a brilliant idea. He suggested bringing his family to Florida for some sightseeing and park visits. Well, now I'll be joining them with the kids. We were going to honeymoon there, so it should be easy to join them. I'll give Emily's ticket to either my sister or another family member and rebook everything to be near him and his family. Though I've responded to a few, I haven't had time to review everyone's comments. Right now, I'm just trying to distract myself until the day goes on enough that I can contact Scott. I just finished the morning stand-up meeting. Having been here so early, my stomach is flipping after drinking about 2 pots of coffee. I just can't focus. I feel like I can't do much but tell Scott what I know. So I'm going to take a sick day and go over to see if he's around. If not, I'll give him a call and track him down. Scott is a teacher on summer break, and Julie works a 9 to 5 like me, so chances are good this will work out. Wish me luck, Reddit. I went to Scott's place a little after 11 a.m. He had just put his daughter down for a nap, and in the kitchen we had a long, rather candid conversation. He had suspected something for a few months now, mostly with Emily's help and some mutual friends. Julie had been good at covering her tracks. I regretfully only have a few hundred screenshots from Emily's phone, not the entire 8 months of text conversations, but I gave him what I had and promised to help him any way I could. As an analyst in a mid-sized insurance company's fraud department, I know a few things and people that might help. Still, I'm trying to save what I can from my brother-in-law's kitchen. Knowing I won't betray Scott, I have to speak to Emily tonight and break the news to my friends and family as quickly as I can. Although I had some issues with the flight, as Emily was traveling under her maiden name, and our airline has a name change restriction, I managed to rebook most of the honeymoon. I even got a partial refund and rebooked for my sister, who will be traveling with 3 brothers and a niece in a few weeks. I don't want to tip anyone off until Scott has a chance to confront Julie, so I'm waiting to cancel the venues until after I speak to Emily. But I will definitely be telling my family and friends this afternoon, asking them to keep it quiet for now. Right now, I'm in a frenzy, canceling everything I can, and I'm headed down to the bank soon to create a new account and sort out the finances. It should be decent since we weren't married, and I made more income. The mortgage is not in my name, though Emily did contribute about $30,000 against my $80,000 for the down payment. It could be worse, but I'll likely have to pay her back that money, plus some share of the mortgage payments for the last 2 years. The update was included in the same post as an edit. It's now about 10 p.m. and I'm writing from my friend's place. His name is Ben, and he used to be a co-worker of mine in the same line of work. As I mentioned earlier, I work for a respectable-sized insurance company's fraud department as a field analyst. For those unfamiliar with the job, I basically work as a private investigator, investigating what we believe to be fraudulent claims regarding workers' compensation. Anyway, as I hinted, Scott asked for my help in tracking down the other man Julie was cheating with. We only had a name, let's call him Mike. I started by searching for Mike using Julie's contacts on LinkedIn, but it came up empty, which I found odd. Julie had mentioned she wouldn't be home until late, and Scott had told me she was supposed to go out for drinks with coworkers after work. I already had a pretty good idea of what was going on. I told Scott I'd help him, but he had to come with me. I immediately contacted Ben, my friend, told him about the situation, and got him to agree to meet us later in the day. We drove over to Scott's parents' house first so they could see their granddaughter. I waited in the car and had no idea what Scott told them. Then we headed to Julie's workplace. It was one of those big commercial strip malls with bland offices lined up in a row in a huge parking lot. We drove until we found Julie's car, and then I had Scott open it using the spare key. I handed Scott a GPS tracker and a voice-activated recorder to place in the car. Once we were done, we left, parked down the street, and waited for Julie to leave the office. About 30 minutes later, Ben showed up, got in the car with us, and about an hour later, Julie walked out with 2 of her co-workers, along with a tall, younger-looking guy with dark hair. I thought, damn, Julie, you're making this easy for me. I snapped a few pictures from the car, then waited for Julie to leave in hers and started following her. They were clearly holding hands. But she didn't head straight to a motel or anything. Instead, she drove to a nice pub and grill in a pleasant part of town and parked on the street. I followed her inside the building, then found my own parking spot and followed the layout. Ben went in first since no one knew him. His job was to be my alibi and try to get any incriminating photos of Julie and Mike. Tom and I waited in the car for about 40 minutes before Ben sent the first of a series of texts. The photo showed Julie and Mike kissing in front of their two co-workers. Tom's suspicions were confirmed. Julie was hiding the affair from him. He was clearly furious and devastated. Apparently, one of the co-workers is married, and Tom and Julie get along well as couples. About the same age, both of them have toddlers. Tom says he still genuinely wants to know who this man is, even when I questioned whether that would be enough for him. We can find out later. I try to convince him, but right now he seems almost pleading. I so advise Ben to wait, text him that I'm on my way, and then go inside the pub myself. Julie and her team are laughing and drinking at one of those big circular tables next to the front window. I pause as I enter, seem startled, then yell to Julie, "Hi, what are you doing here?" She is clearly startled to see me, and everyone around her tenses right away. Julie says we are getting married in 3 weeks, and quickly presents me as the fiancé of her sister. Everybody is congratulating each other. After thanking them, I then extend my hand to the dark-haired man and introduce myself using my full name, thinking he would react in the same manner. He does, and I'm a little surprised Mike is not mentioned. I introduce myself to everyone else, then tell Julie I'm here to meet a coworker. I wave to Ben, then step away. Once I go over to Ben, I give him the guy's name, and we both start whipping out our phones and get to work. We find him not too long ago. He has court case rulings against him and social media accounts. When we learn Mike is his middle name, everything sorts out really well. Right now, I'm just grateful that Julie isn't cheating on Tom with 2 other coworkers. Mike is 30, married, and has a 2-year-old child, it turns out. This just keeps getting better and better. Still, I send Tom the guy's name and decide I want to challenge myself and urge him to wait a few more minutes. Here in the bar, I'm essentially watching over children. To Julie and her staff, I am absolutely visible. My presence is really wrecking the evening. I can see out of the corner of my eye that nobody is very enthusiastic about this. This is excellent. I let this continue for around 15 minutes before telling Tom to contact Julie, informing her he's spending the night with his kid at his parents' place. Not long later, I find Julie pulling out her phone, showing Mike, and subsequently everyone choosing to pack out. Saying goodnight, Julie approaches me and asks if Emily and I would like to come over for dinner this weekend. I grin and wish her and her colleagues a nice night. It seems like a fantastic plan. Ben and I pay our bill, then dash back to the waiting Tom after waiting for them to go. There is some uncertainty here, as we are unsure what exactly Julie was intending to do. She may have already reserved a hotel room and was on her way, as I had suspected, which would have greatly reduced my options and complicated things. But it turns out that tonight was most likely supposed to be just drinks at the bar. It wasn't until Tom chose to spend the night at his parents' that it evolved into anything more. Julie headed straight for home. We trailed after her out of view and parked down the block. Not long after that, another car pulled into Tom's driveway. Mike got out, walked up to the door, knocked, and was met by Julie. They went inside together. Now, at about 9:30 p.m., I have my own things to accomplish tonight as a friend. I believe I have done almost everything I could to help Tom, and he can do the rest alone. I mean, I feel terrible for the guy, absolutely. But given my circumstances, I don't want to become any more involved in this drama than I already am. Being the wingman for him as he confronts his unfaithful wife seems a little too much for me. Tom thinks it's good he will finish the rest on his own. Claire? Guess he's more of a guy than you could have imagined. He goes to Claire's car, gets my stuff, and we say our farewells. That was almost 2 hours ago. My phone hasn't been blowing up, so I'm not sure what's been going on with Julie. I did receive one text message from Tom stating everything was done, and he was heading to his parents' place for real this time. Ben has been with me since then. That essentially marks my end of Tom's story. He entered the house filming with his phone if he was wise, and followed my counsel. I'll find out later. Still, my first focus right now is getting home to inform Emily that the wedding is off. She will almost definitely take it poorly. She won't be absent, as I said, but right now I simply cannot get married to her. Though I'm not sure what the future holds for us or whether we will be living with each other or not, most certainly we are not getting married anytime soon. I also have to add, are you people dumb? People who keep asking, why didn't you talk to her first? Why didn't you confront her? She stone-cold lied to her brother-in-law, knowing for about 14 years that she had lied. She supposedly believes he's a very fantastic parent and spouse. I'm not built that way. but maybe you are foolish enough to believe that someone can lie so ruthlessly to someone they are meant to care about and then tell you the truth. I never had reason to ever doubt Emily or not trust her until that point. She was actually unreliable in front of my face, however, and I should let that go or expect her to be honest with me. I suppose you have no idea what it's like to have your whole perspective on someone change suddenly. It's confusing and, quite honestly, a little panic-inducing. Since it brought me to the truth, I'm really surprised I maintained my head and followed my instincts instead of rushing her straight away. If she had lied to me and then deleted those text messages, it would have been shockingly simple for her to lie to me. And if she had, I would never have seen how little I really knew about her, never read the terrible things she said, never seen how crafty and two-faced she could be. I'm headed home to talk to Emily. I will notify everyone later to inform them of the outcome, not expecting it to be a good one. Here's yet another update for you folks. Given everything that has transpired, I suppose there is much to cover. If I'm honest, much of it hasn't been that outstanding. Actually, it has been rather shoddy, but I will get to that. First of all, I quite late that evening departed Ben's residence. Though she had no clue the business was really her sister's affair, Emily already knew I was out talking business with him. Still, it was approaching an unreasonable hour, partly because I was trying to get the strength to go home and confront her. After about 4 or 5 pep talks with Ben, I finally got off my butt, texted Emily I was heading home, and drove. As I said in the previous post, I was very surprised when I arrived to find Julie sobbing on the sofa with Emily when I stepped into the house. This was the last thing I was expecting, because Julie's car hadn't been visible in the driveway when I got home. I stopped momentarily and almost turned around and left. This was not how I expected things to go, and I knew Julie's presence would make an already bad situation 1,000,000 times worse. Still, I had plans I needed to advance. The symbolic clock was ticking in the back of my mind. I had people to tell and wedding plans to cancel. Both Emily and Julie glanced up at me as I walked into the room, but the accusing rant never materialized. I just looked back, questioning my eyes. The moment passed, Julie returned to weeping, Emily returned to consoling, and I let the uncomfortable half-minute hang in the air as I considered. Tom apparently had not disclosed my help in revealing Julie's cheating. Not for any other purpose than to watch how Emily reacted, I chose to play stupid. I settled on a reclining chair, dropped my laptop bag, and pulled my phone from my pocket. I pretended to be fidgeting with it, then asked them, "What's going on?" Julie just kept crying, but Emily turned to face me and said, "Tom is divorcing Julie." Well, indeed, I thought as much. I resolved to ask the obvious question forward. "What for?" I asked her. Emily paused, massaging Julie's back to glance at me. Her face seemed to twist and distort practically. Imagine the face a 5-year-old makes when you order them to eat their lima beans or broccoli. Julie looked at Emily in a way I couldn't have understood from a sibling. The pregnant silence ended when Emily answered, "She cheated on him." Now I have to confess, this answer stunned me. I had definitely not expected this. Indeed, the more cynical readers here could believe, well, the cat was out of the bag, so there's no point in hiding it. And yeah, that's true. She could have, however, just as easily pretended to be ignorant, or perhaps phrased it another way, like Tom accused Julie of cheating, instead of essentially confirming it to me personally. Though it's part of my job to pay attention to not just what people say, but also how they say it. Maybe I'm being pedantic here. Julie was not delighted about this. She sort of collapsed into the sofa a little and performed an odd simultaneous sigh and sob. I may have stuttered a little, but I wanted to move on and go for that gold, that is. Kind of Emily probably understood the shock, and while she would have been accurate in a way, her assumption would not have been entirely correct. "Did you know?" Emily nodded. She said nothing more. Her hand was still massaging her sister's shoulder. I asked for the clear follow-up. "How long?" Without thinking twice, the response came back much more effortlessly than I had anticipated. 8 months. I was startled by how readily she owned it. Julie also startled me. She slapped her sister's hand off her, and I guess even Emily was a bit startled to say it out. Leaning back in the chair, I allowed myself time to rip the remaining Band-Aid clean off. "We're not planning to get married." From both sisters, 2 expressions like surprised goats and a chorus of, "Huh, what?" Emily leaped from the sofa and outstretched her arms, repeating herself. "We're not getting married. I can't marry someone who would cover up adultery, especially not for 8 months." The body language was, "You can't be serious," but I merely placed palms in front of myself. "I'm serious. I don't like this, not one bit. I can't be married to you with the way I feel. You participated in this, and this bothers me too much. It would be a mistake. The waterworks began right away, and even Julie engaged in that perch-like mouth action meant to be sucking air. There were howls from Emily, claims of not loving her, pleas to my sense of obligation, financial loss, annoyance to all our friends, and the humiliation of it all. Though it was really nothing I hadn't considered, hearing Emily say it through body-racking sobs felt strange. I probably made a major error right here. Maybe not, but I'm not sure how long Tom would have kept my participation in things off the records. Look, I already canceled the honeymoon. It's not happening, I replied, trying to persuade Emily of the finality of it all. I knew it was a bomb the second it left her lips, and the explosion was damned near imminent. Julie, to her credit, had always been quick on the uptake, probably helping her mislead her husband for so long. When she combined my appearance at the bar earlier in the evening with her awareness, I could almost see the understanding setting in on her. "You jerk!" she yelled, then shot across the room at me. Though I'm not a big man anymore and I'm not a slouch either, the force Julie threw at me caused me to lurch backward, and I just had time to grab my hands before she started slashing at my face with her fingernails. I managed to shove her away even though I almost dropped the phone I still held in my hand. Julie made another lunge at me, but surprisingly, Emily did exactly what I ordered her to, wrapped her arms around her sister's waist and held her in place. I yelled very loudly, "Julie, get off me! Emily, get your sister under control!" Holding my phone up for emphasis, I exclaimed, "Get out of here right now, or I'm calling the police," at Julie. Emily urged us both to calm down. "Matt, she doesn't have anywhere to go right now," she told me, and Tom took her car keys. That explained the absence of a car in the driveway, but it made no difference to me. With Julie, I was totally done, and I wanted to make sure she understood. I marched into my home office, slammed the door, and called the police. I told them I feared for my life, that my fiancé's sister had assaulted me, that I had locked myself in my office, and that I was bleeding from my face and had blurry vision. I also mentioned to them that I had the entire altercation recorded on my phone. Jessica knocks on the door just as I was finishing up my call. "Matt, please come out. We need to talk about this, and please, I love you. Don't do this." And even Julie is sorry. She wants to apologize. I'm fairly sure that last one was a lie, but Jessica was definitely losing it. I ignored her, and her efforts to persuade me from the office stopped probably just as the cops arrived at our front door. Hearing Emily talking to them, I decided to come out. Two men. One of them looked younger than me, maybe about Emily's age, while the other one was older and more dissatisfied with life in general. I said hello, pointed to Julie, said she assaulted me, and volunteered to show the police the video I recorded. The younger one questioned if I intended to file charges. I responded in yes. Once again, he asked me if I intended to file charges. I responded once again in yes. Both officers glanced at each other at this moment. Before the young policeman could open his mouth once again, I shouted, "Yes, damn it, I want to press charges. I have video evidence, and this is going to court, or else I'm going to call up your boss and ask him to come down and do it personally." I suppose they were really taken aback that I recognized his name. Not that we are buddies or anything, but given my line of work, I spend lots of time engaging with local law enforcement, and I've spoken with most of the brass a few times in the previous several years. To be honest, I was starting to feel really hot under the collar at this point. Although I could see what these men were thinking, I absolutely disagree with it. Facts are what they are facts. Sure, I may not be bleeding out on the floor, but I wanted Julie gone because she attacked me in my house. Fortunately, things didn't get out of hand right away. The two cops arrested Julie and placed her in the back of the patrol car. She was weeping and shrieking the whole time like some kind of gibbering lunatic. Emily wasn't any better. She only repeated, "No, please, no," over and over. The younger officer rounded around at this moment to inquire if everything was well here. I just let them know I was heading to bed. He questioned Emily once more, and she didn't reply right away. So he says, "Is everything okay here, ma'am?" By now, he was clearly searching for something. Though I hated this man, I bit my lip. Emily only nodded at the officer when she finally realized he was addressing her. Clearly, the man was not happy with this and started to ask her once more. At which point, I interject and say, "If you want to go on a fishing expedition, You might want to do it over there on the lawn where my doorbell camera isn't recording you. I think at this point I'd pushed my luck with this guy too much. But what could I do? I believe I was probably about 30 seconds from having the cuffs slapped on me until his teammate arrived and essentially drew him away. Presumably in his late 60s, he was an older guy who most likely didn't want to handle 2 arrests straight at the start of his shift, particularly since one of them clearly would cause more difficulty than it was worth. He probably guided him out of it, and they left, taking Julie away, hopefully out of my life permanently. By now, I'm considering whether or not I should stay here. My parents live a few hours away, and the idea of how destitute I would be in the near term ruled out either their apartment or a motel. I thus chose to sleep in the guest room. Emily tried several fruitless attempts to get me to interact with her in conversation or sleep in our bed, but I told her we would discuss it tomorrow, and I was tired and wanted to be left alone. She left me alone, thankfully, and I collapsed harder than I had in years, essentially bringing us up to current to the latest update. But my Reddit friends, let me tell you this, the following day turned out to be somewhat unusual in my life. First of all, I got up at 2 p.m. Emily was still at home. She had scrubbed the house from top to bottom. The toilets shone and the floors gleamed. In the bathroom, I could lick the linoleum and it would likely be minty fresh. She clearly had been busy, but she kind of lingered out of direct range when she noticed me. Not that interesting, but she seemed to want to express something. I understand last night was horrible for everyone, and she was most likely unsure. Like, did I call off the wedding right in the middle of things? Was I serious about this? Was my anger justified? Breathing deeply, I informed her we had to stop our conversation. I considered rebuffing her when she attempted to sit next to me on the sofa, but I didn't. We were not getting married. Hence, I didn't have to pretend like I disliked her because, honestly, I didn't. She disappointed me, politely disturbed by some of the things I had read in her text interactions with her sister, but we were both suffering here, and I didn't want to make things any more complex than they already were. For Emily to really and completely realize the wedding was off, it needed some more persuasion on my side. She seemed not to be absorbing it. Hell, that's an understatement. She was a disaster. She was, I believe, periodically hyperventilating, though clearly not only was this my idea, but I had also had more time to come to grips with it. I was keeping it together better. She finally posed the important question. What about us? I know I will receive a lot of criticism from people for this, particularly the type of Redditors who believe any transgression in a relationship grounds for nuking it from orbit. One might even argue that my calling off the wedding was like tossing a Moab on our 8-year relationship. Actually, however, I had no response for Emily at that point. I told her so I simply didn't know. I said I read all those text messages, and it showed me a side of you that I didn't know existed, and I wasn't sure about you or our relationship anymore. I said I couldn't understand why she would go along with Julie, putting down Scott, joining in, and even egging her on, cheating on not only him but also their daughter too. She continued repeating, I know it was wrong, I know. I begged her for an explanation, but she couldn't provide one. She only stated she had to pick her sister and that she got carried away. I told her I considered a good sister to be someone who kept you on the straight and narrow and refused to provide a free pass allowing you to be a jerk. She agreed with me and claimed she would do better, but because Julie had always been the boss when they were little, and she was always the follower. I understand I have an older brother too, and while I live somewhat more independently, I have spent the previous 24 years of my life living on the other side of the world from him, apart from the rare visit around Thanksgiving or Christmas. Still, maybe I had a leg up on Emily because Julie was a piece of garbage while my older brother was a great person. Here is where, in like 96 hours, I have my second huge shock of life. Emily adds, "It's not fair." "What's not fair?" I questioned her. "You were sexting that bimbo wife Mandy girl on Instagram last year. I got over it. I was so hurt, but I got over it. Why can't you get over this?" "Why, huh?" I questioned her if she was high or having a mental break. What the hell is she talking about? Who is this bimbo wife Mandy? Like, I have no clue. Like, all right, it was terrible of me, but I have totally not been performing internet sex or sexting or anything with anybody, particularly not some Instagram lady. At this point, I'm objecting very loudly. Emily is shouting at me through her tears, saying she saw the text last year and chose not to confront me since I had stopped. She apparently had been looking at my social media from my home computer while I was at work. which should have been very dull since I just had family and a few work buddies on there. She's just calling me a liar and a pervert and all kinds of things, so I attempt to make this case to her and offer to let her log into all my accounts and verify for herself. She begins throwing items at me, so things are spiraling out of control. I warn her that if she throws one more item, I will have her removed from this home just like her sister. She stomps off to the master bedroom and shuts the door, shouts at me. At this point, I am so damned perplexed I hardly know what to think. I power up my PC, walk into my office, and Google bimbo wife Mandy. Sure enough, there is an Instagram, a Twitter, a Reddit even, and naturally an OnlyFans. When I click on one of the Instagram links, a picture of a very curvaceous woman obviously stretching the boundaries of science and technology comes up. And suppose her whereabouts as well? Another country. Well, everyone remember all the wonderful comments I made about my brother? Last Christmas, who was staying with us from overseas? Guess? Guess who I said, sure, go ahead and use my office computer to play games if you have jet lag. As far as I know, my brother signed on to either Instagram or whatever, and was most likely paying money to sex with this lady after his wife and kids went to sleep. What a wonderful man he is. Now I would like to contact my brother not just to validate my doubts, but also to give him a nasty earful. It will have to wait, however, since it's like 3 or 4 in the morning. But I am trying to figure out how I feel about everything while climbing the walls here. I find everyone to be very disappointing. For a split second, I attempt to link whatever the hell Emily witnessed my brother do with what she did with Julie. Damn, what is this world coming to? Still, it doesn't really come together even with best intentions. She didn't confront me when she saw this, maybe because she is more forgiving or tolerant than I am. I wish she had, however. It would have given me a chance to even demonstrate her how I would behave and to straightforwardly explain to her my full personal opinion on these matters. Later on, it may have positively affected her, or perhaps had no effect at all. Uncertainty surrounds me. All I know is that this piece is turning into a book, and I blew off much of the morning when I need to be getting this out of my thoughts and onto this page. Although I feel better after completing it, there are still probably 3 or 4 posts to be told. I no longer want to submit them to this subreddit. Though I'm not sure they would allow me, I will attempt to subtly update my profile in the next day or two with the rest of the blowout talking to my parents, brother, Emily's parents, and lastly, where Emily and I stand. One thing I can say, however, is that for a variety of reasons, most of my direct family connections tend to be somewhat strained. Although my parents are mostly encouraging, as the reality of the financial loss sets in, their support is waning. Sure, the marriage is still off. From the start, it was almost certain. Emily's parents seem a little more annoyed, and I'm sure they are inserting pins and voodoo dolls made right now in my image. For those curious, Julie is out of prison. She got Emily to bail her out, and I even chewed out Emily for that, calling her her sister's lackey, which I believe really connected with her, as she sent me like a 30-page letter describing how her sister always controlled her throughout her entire life. Having read it twice again, I wish we had discussed this almost certainly somewhere over the last 8 years. Perhaps things would be different. None sure. Anyway, Reddit, should someone still be interested, expect a final chapter of this story in like a day or two, and maybe a follow-up once the former wedding date passes. Update. It has taken more time than I first planned to get around. Many events have kept me somewhat busy over the last few days. It wasn't until today, when I had some spare time after lunch, that I could sit down and sort out this. I'll attempt to pass through as much as I can before then. Still, I would like to highlight a few points in response to previous post comments. I will attempt to be succinct. First of all, other than what I know that Tom is still divorcing her, I know not much about what is happening with his divorce. Clearly, nothing including paperwork exists, but the purpose is evident. Apart from that, I'm not really in a position to be supporting any kind of course of action Tom should follow, or provide him legal counsel, or help him in doing anything to the other guy, or searching down his wife. Tom is a mature guy who can act however he likes within the given circumstances. As his buddy, my role is just to help him and provide guidance should he seek it. Second, this is not some kind of guerrilla marketing for an OnlyFans female. If it was, I should have posted it on the original post, which was read by over 4 million people and hit the main page of Reddit. Furthermore, Considering that this post became somewhat famous on Reddit, it's not very surprising that bimbo wife Mandy, another Redditor, happened to be tracking the narrative and saw her name. It might have easily been any other of the hundreds and hundreds of ladies using Reddit to share their photos. And briefly speaking about Mandy, I have in fact spoken with her. She looks personally really kind, and she was really extremely helpful in verifying stuff for me. Guys, however, there are no future romantic intentions here. Mandy is married, clearly very happily, for over 30 years. Although her husband must be fine with it, honestly, she is much too much for a simple insurance man like me to take seriously. With that all clear-cut, now on to the update. Last time I wrote, it was too late for me to get in touch with my brother. I assumed he had spoken with Mandy using my office computer. Among such men, I am one that must be actively striving to address problems that come before him once they arise. For my line of work, this is fantastic, unfortunately. In circumstances like mine, all I was doing was driving myself crazy. I so made the decision to inhale deeply, wait till later, and get on with what I had to accomplish, leaving everything aside. First thing first was trying to get every individual from my side who I had invited to the wedding notified of its cancellation. As you may remember, I had previously told my parents and had them call my relatives on the day I decided upon only myself, and Emily had the whole guest list, so I had to handle the rest alone. Respect for my friends led me to choose to call rather than text, but this might have been a poor choice, as every phone conversation usually culminated in a very long justification of why I was postponing the wedding. Though I could have offered some other explanation, I wanted people to know that I wasn't being lazy or perhaps having cold feet, something inane. Not just for my own reputation, but also, I believe, to honor the individuals who had promised to visit that day to assist pair Emily and me. This meant that it was already dawn in another country, as I only managed to get in touch with everyone late into the evening. Though I knew what I had to do, I wanted to be sure my ducks were all in line, hence I stopped and prepared a lunch in the kitchen. Emily wasn't home, I noted. When she departed and settled down to eat and consider what to do about my brother's predicament, I had no clue. For brevity here, let's name my brother Chris. Chris and I have always been really close, even though he is 15 years my senior. In my life, he was essentially a quasi-parental figure, as he was already headed toward adulthood by the time I could have long-term recollections. He was always kind with his time, played with his younger brother when other teenagers would most likely have avoided such an activity like the plague, and overall appeared to me growing up to be rather mature and smart. Simply said, I really respected him. I was still getting used to the concept that he had been sexting a female not his wife in my home, and I had to make decisions. It was evident that I should talk to him about it, but at this point, I wasn't sure if I wanted him to confess only to help me clean my reputation, considering how poor my relationship with Emily was. Anything might be salvaged, though. For at least propriety, I had to scold him about this and get him to stop. I wasn't sure, however, whether I should tell his wife about it or not rat him out. It all rested on what he told me and whether I believed him or not. After finishing my dinner, I signed on to Facebook and video called Chris. Since his specialty is connected to IT, and Chris is almost always accessible throughout the day, today was no exception. He now usually works from home as a remote office worker. It hardly rang more than once or twice before his response. We greeted one another, did some small talk, and then I just kind of dived into it and asked him whether he had been using my computer to sex chat ladies on the internet while he was visiting me. Chris' expression froze. Then he leaned over the camera's out-of-frame line. He clearly was shutting his office door. To me, he answered, "Yeah, I did." "Why?" Under my breath, I cursed and told Chris that Emily had assumed his flirting was me because he had used my computer. I told him I wasn't glad to pay the hit for him, and I questioned him straightforwardly if Karen knew about this or not. He hesitated for a few seconds, stammered over his words, then looked a little ashamed and answered, "No, Karen didn't know. I would prefer if it were kept that way." He then went on to say that mostly in the bedroom aspect, their relationship had been very difficult since their youngest birth 6 years earlier. Chris has always been a quite quiet guy, particularly in relation to personal matters. At least he had always been that way while chatting with his considerably younger brother. This time, however, he just let everything fall out. Things had been unfortunate. Getting turned down had become old to him. No matter what he did or how much Karen contributed around the home, she was always exhausted. Eventually, this resulted in issues on his side, some kind of performance anxiety on the rare times Karen would really feel up for some bedroom fun, and things simply went worse from there. He responded essentially, "There's no amount of socks cleaned up, laundry folded, dishes done, or time spent babysitting children that would get me laid. It was just not happening, so I began to spend evenings working in my office." He even performed the finger quotations in reference. Apparently, his working at night became a quite strong addiction to OnlyFans sites, which swiftly spiraled out of hand given the relative seclusion he enjoyed at his office for actual work. When I questioned him if he was still doing it, he swore up and down that he wasn't. When he said that, I thought I believed him. He appeared real, but I felt something was amiss in the back of my mind, bugging me. Perhaps it was because of all the dishonesty I experienced lately, but I was questioning my own brother, who has been a stand-up person to me our whole life. Being in this state really disgusted me. Now, the issue I was dealing with here seemed very complicated. First, I would have to convince my brother to inform Emily that it was him all along if I wanted my name cleared. But if he did that, then there was no assurance Emily wouldn't angrily tell Karen. Though at the same time, I didn't know whether I felt comfortable putting a bomb on my brother's marriage over something he not only stated he stopped personally, I believed it would be better if Karen knew. This is in a kind of morally murky area for me. Though I didn't know exactly what to do, I urged him to notify his wife about this and start marital therapy. They had been going for the last 12 months, he added. And although it was beneficial, what had truly helped him was acquiring a prescription for some generic Viagra. Actually, I performed a spit take at that, almost misting my computer screen with water. He told me they had been attempting to schedule at least a couple of times a week intimate time, and the Viagra had helped him overcome performance anxiety to the point where now they were both looking forward to time with each other after the kids went to bed. This was essentially, "Hey, this is actually going in the right direction now. Please don't screw this up for us." Not just for Chris and Karen, but also for my 4 nieces. I really, truly did not want to be in this situation. Should what Chris was telling me be the truth, I may be hurling a firebomb into a marriage undergoing repair. Though at the time I believed that waiting and seeing was the greatest choice I had, it was uncertain what would happen, and so certainly it may disappoint some people. After all, I was going to see him in a few weeks in the flesh, and once I had him alone in a room and a few beers into him, I was going to most certainly find the truth. That seemed to be the best course of action. Still, that evening I turned in early. Emily didn't show up until the next morning. She seemed sloppy, as if she slept little at all. Mostly in line with habit, I asked her where she had been. We had been together for about 8 years after all. She informed me she had driven Julie to her parents' place and stayed the night following her down to the courtroom for her arraignment to post bail. She emphasized how terrible it was to have to inform her parents that I had called off the wedding. She spoke angrily when I asked her whether her parents understood the reason for it. I tried to be cool, but by now in this experience I was losing it. Though it was little and petty, I bit back at her. "Are you going to move back there so that they have both girls at home now?" This infuriated me to no end. She added, "You don't need to be an ass about this." And I said, "And you don't need to be Julie's damned underling." I could see Emily clearly flinching at that. It clearly connected with her, and I tempered my fury as the corners of her eyes began to tear up. We just stood miles apart in our house's living room and didn't say anything for a good solid minute or two until Emily chose to keep talking. "Our parents are coming here at 5. I really face-palmed at this. Just my own ego. I was going to leave her without consulting her on this. I did, after all, have to sit down with them and hammer out the specifics of the wedding and whatever leftover deposit we had, and I at least wanted to personally explain to everyone why it wasn't happening. So great. Let's go ahead and clear the path." I tried to keep myself occupied, but on a Sunday there isn't much you can do but waste time. Time wasting isn't very fun when you know you are headed into the meat grinder in just a few hours. Still, 5 o'clock arrived along with our parents. Just 1 month after we closed on the home, we all gathered around the big dining room table Emily had purchased. Though it was secondhand from Facebook Marketplace, she liked it since it was solid wood with a lovely finish and capable of seating 8. She always wanted to have large dinner gatherings for our families, but she didn't want this. The following 3 hours were torturous. Nobody, nor should they be, was happy. My own parents were obviously the greatest support I could get, but even that was subdued, basically along the lines of, "Well, it's his decision to make," which more or less implies, Yeah, we think this is crazy too, but we're still backing him. Honestly, that was all right with me. The stigma by association of calling off the wedding did not require my parents to acquire. With embracing it, I was good. We finally worked out a reasonable agreement on the wedding. We would attempt to recover back whatever money we could, divide it, and then eat whatever losses there were collectively. When it came to the home, Emily fiercely disagreed with my suggestion of reimbursing her or her parents for the deposit. She basically didn't want to relocate. As you can guess, Emily and I hadn't actually discussed the U.S. living together scenario in too great depth. She was surprised when I even mentioned settling the house equity, because the inference here is that I expect her to leave our house. She had a fit. I have no guilt about it. Before attempting to work with her parents on a payment schedule, I should have resolved our relationship status with her first. It really tipped my hand to everyone on how I was feeling about our connection. While I believe our parents anticipated it, or at least understood, Emily was devastated. She made it plain. I am not moving out of my house, and we are not breaking up, she said, clearly rejecting our splitting over this. And that's essentially how my Sunday night ended. Emily and I attempted to hash it out some more when our parents left, but we kept circling each other, and I had to control my natural tendency to run her down until we resolved it. I wanted to switch off my thoughts because, really, I was also rather exhausted. Unbelievably, we simply ended up silently sitting on the sofa watching a movie together till it was time for bed. We left it there with a, "We'll talk about it more tomorrow," and headed to our own rooms. Monday morning, I found a big handwritten note shoved under the door from Emily. I thought I would deal with it later after glancing quickly at the first few pages and headed to work. Emily still was in bed when I left. She had to have written the letter late. I began phoning suppliers and venues on my list at the office, rearranging certain appointments. It produced mixed bag of outcomes. The catering staff insisted that, under the premise of ordering most of the food, I pay most of their expenses. Like they expected me to eat week-old steak, I fired back at them over this, but my plea went unacknowledged. I tried explaining what occurred to the lady running the catering company, but it appeared to further strengthen her will to extract as much money from me. On the other hand, the DJ I paid for entertainment was very kind and returned almost all the money. Things continued that way, and throughout the day, I read Emily's letter between calls and work. This is 30 pages of written words now, hence I will just be summarizing. Basically, Emily has been bullied by Julie ever since childhood. Her reaction to this has been to basically follow anything Julie says or wishes to hear. She continued, saying it had become somewhat normal for her to live, that she was just terrified, afraid to upset the balance, create a disturbance, or perhaps even express an opinion. I thought about this because, honestly, when I look back at our relationship with a more critical eye, I kind of feel that Emily was a little too perfect of a girlfriend. She never disagreed with me, never chose her ideas over mine, or even fairly argued too forcefully against anything I wanted to undertake. She went out of her way to seem helpful, and behaved throughout our relationship almost exactly like a yes woman. We had never even had a little debate in 8 years, much less a full-fledged fight until today. From a relationship viewpoint, everything sounds fantastic until, naturally, it's not. You know, what they refer to as people-pleasing behavior. I couldn't get rid of this sense that Emily had deep-seated insecurity and a desire to make others happy. When I start looking at it this way, a lot of things make sense to me, and I start to understand that despite spending 8 years with Emily, I really don't know her that well. She seems to have created a picture around her that is essentially a mirror, reflecting whatever she believes others want to see. Regarding our relationship, she has essentially been playing my ideal girlfriend while never truly allowing me inside to see who she is. Hell, probably definitely just another reflection, this time of Julie with all her warts and flaws. Therefore, I cannot even argue that what I saw in those text chats is the real Emily. Though maybe she loves me for who I am, and how I put my ideas on my face and my heart on my sleeve, this seems strange, since we seem to be in an unequal relationship. Perhaps, however, I adore her, just for the mirror she is pointing up to my face. I'm right there also. I'm not sure whether this sounds too mystical for you. I'm still attempting to grab by my fingers this wisp of an idea. The letter Emily sent me was the first actual insight into her upbringing that I had seen. All I know is that in the last few days, I have most certainly learned more about her than I have in the past 8 years. That evening we discussed this, more especially her actions and background. Our final decision was that she needs assistance. Too afraid to offend anybody, lest she face her sister's fury, her parents' criticism, or the loss of affection from the one she loves, she is a mature woman, cruelly trapped behaving like a child. This is not how a relationship should be, so I can say that I feel much more secure and convinced that my calling off the wedding was the right one. Actually, it may not be any more accurate. After our conversation that evening, I went to bed much less tensely than I had in a few days. Since I couldn't discover more, the tale most likely stops here.